Welcome to another episode of Wake Up America, Wake Up. This is part of the Wars and Rumors of Wars series. One of the things that motivated me to begin this series was the fact that Russia had invaded Ukraine. And of course, for most of you, that's old news. However, what you don't know is the reasoning behind the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And this podcast is not meant to build Vladimir Putin's reputation or side with the fact that he invaded Ukraine. But mostly this series will discuss current, past, and wars yet to come. And I wanted to give you some insight as to what I believe based on my research why Vladimir Putin put his country in jeopardy, obviously, and the citizens of Russia, and the Ukrainian country, why he's jeopardizing a lot of those lives. So hold on to your seats. I believe this will be controversial because a lot of the information dates back as far as the 1960s. It's not new the Russian Federation had invaded Ukraine, right? That's all we read about and we see in the news. So I would like to take this moment to offer prayers and condolences to the Ukrainian nation. War is not a pleasant experience by any circumstance. I sincerely hope that both the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian government can come to some sort of arrangement to stop this unnecessary war and begin the healing process, because both nations share people, family, and friends caught in the middle of this war. I'll tell you this much: someone is waiting in the wings to profit from this misery. And the profiteering is in the form of expansion or global domination. You may think this statement is radical, but wars not only garner military power, but a sphere of influence as well. And it is my opinion this war will devastate the country of Ukraine and create another Cold War with Russia. Now, the US and its NATO allies have known for quite some time Russia was threatening to invade the country of Ukraine. But the question you should be re-examining over and again is, why has Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine? What could have possibly made Vladimir Putin so desperate to invade Ukraine? There are several reasons. One reason is the gas pipeline that travels through the Ukraine, which is vitally important for the Russian Federation's economy, right? One would think there's a good reason. Or another reason is the Ukrainian territory is a strategically located landmass that NATO allies can exploit in times of military conflict. In other words, Ukraine sits right in front or at the border of the Russian Federation, and the placement of tactical nuclear weapons and surveillance equipment can prove useful in times of conflict. But yet another notable reason is the Russian Federation is attempting to expand outward again to bring Russia's territory back to its glory days from the Cold War era. You know, when the Soviet Union, or what was then known as the was a badass threat to the NATO alliance. All of these are good assumptions. But the truth is, Russia as a nation feels the encroachment of NATO at its doorstep. Don't get me wrong. I'm not siding with the Russian invasion into Ukraine, but I strongly feel this was exactly what NATO was expecting when it began talks with the Ukrainian government to join NATO. Sure, Russia and Ukraine have historically had conflicts with one another over the Crimea. I will not negate that. However, the fires for an invasion did not begin to get stoked until the Bush administration broke its word in 2014 to cease NATO expansion.
Now, there's something we keep hearing from all European leaders: Putin's security concerns, Putin's safety concerns. What exactly are they? And can the West resolve them? To answer this question, we must go back in history. The year is 1990. The Soviet Union is on its last legs. Washington and Moscow are discussing a crucial European question: the reunification of Germany. Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, agrees. But he has one condition: the NATO must not expand eastward. It must not enter Russia's security sphere. The US officials agreed, but the terms were never written down. You could argue this was a mistake. Until a promise is codified, it means nothing really. Having said that, a betrayal is a betrayal, written agreement or not.
You see, if you poke at a nest of hornets long enough, they will eventually retaliate if threatened. This, my friends, are what is going on. And it's unfolding as expected in 2022. I know some of you will say that Vladimir Putin has been asking for the Western nations and NATO countries to prepare themselves to deal with Putin and the Russian Federation very harshly, and the invasion only demonstrates that Russian leader Vladimir Putin is provoking war. And that's its senseless invasion into Ukraine requires NATO and its allies to deal with this incursion swiftly and militarily. But you're not seeing the big picture, and I will attempt to explain it. First, let's go back in time during the Cold War. The Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and then the Soviet Union and their respective allies, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, which began following World War II. Typically, history states the Cold War started during the 1947 Truman Doctrine and ended during the Reagan administration in 1991 when the Soviet Union dissolved. But what was the Cold War all about?
The Cold War emerged out of the political settlement of the Second World War. It was a clash not just of military powers, but of ideologies and worldviews.
The Cold War was waged on political, economic, and propaganda fronts and had only limited recourse to weapons. The term was first used by the English writer George Orwell in an article published in 1945 to refer to what he predicted would be a nuclear stalemate between 2 or 3 monstrous superstates, each possessing a weapon by which millions of people can be wiped out in a few seconds. George Orwell wrote this, and déjà vu, we exist in such an era. A brief history lesson. During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were formidable allies in their fight against the Axis powers. The Axis powers, originally called the Rome-Berlin Axis, was a military coalition that initiated World War II and fought against the Allies. Its principal members were Nazi Germany under Chancellor Adolf Hitler, the Kingdom of Italy under Benito Mussolini, and the Empire of Japan under Hideki Tojo. The Soviet Union joined the Allies because Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. By becoming allies with the despised Western powers, the Soviet Union was better able to resist the invasion by the Nazi war machine. Still, the Soviet Union took the brunt of the fighting of the war, suffering the most dead and wounded of any nation in World War II. The Cold War was the outcome of a conflict between communism and capitalism, two resisting worldviews. Another origin of the construct up to the Cold War was the intransigent mindset of both sides. The Soviet Union was exceedingly worried about its security after having been invaded 2 times in the 20th century. In 1945, when America conceived and utilized the atomic bomb against Japan, the USSR was very resolute to conceive one of its own. Both the USSR and the USA constructed up gigantic arsenals of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. The United States checked a hydrogen blasting apparatus in 1952, and in November 1955, the USSR evolved one too. After that, the USA shifted its bombers into Europe. In 1955, West Germany was permitted to rearm and join NATO. Russia answered by forming the Warsaw Mutual Defense Pact with its buffer zone, or Warsaw Pact. However, this delicate relationship between the two, soon to be regarded as superpowers, wasn't on the best terms and was seen by historians as a tense one. Americans in general had a suspicious and wary relationship because the Soviet Union was a communist country, and the Russian leader, Joseph Stalin, was known as a tyrannical leader. But for the better part of history, the world viewed Stalin as a sadistic and brutal leader with a long record of deaths of Russians under his leadership. The US had long been wary of Soviet communism and concerned about Russian leader Joseph Stalin's tyrannical rule of his own country. For their part, the Soviets resented the Americans' decade-long refusal to treat the USSR as a legitimate part of the international community, as well as their delayed entry into World War II, which resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of Russians. After the war ended, these grievances ripened into an overwhelming sense of mutual distrust, enmity, according to the History Channel. It's no mystery that the United States and the Soviet Union were competitive adversaries in areas like economics, the sphere of influence, military power, nuclear proliferation, and the space race. If you recall, the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik into Earth's orbit, which alarmingly had Americans frightened and concerned the Soviets would use outer space to launch nuclear-capable missiles. What I find surreal is the American public was psychologically given an unseen enemy in the form of the Russian bear. The American people, for the first time, was made to feel insecure about the Soviet Union, as were the Russian citizens about America. But this psychological narrative was the fear used by the United States government to proliferate nuclear weapons, build up its military arsenal, which the military-industrial complex gained profits and government funding of an unseen enemy. So the fear of the US and the USSR began the nuclear age in which each nation would possess the tools to destroy its adversary and the planet. For decades, each country was playing a game of chess while gambling with the lives of all the inhabitants of the earth. A gamble that, at any moment, could bring global war based on fictitious fears of each other.